Welcome one and all to the Stock Up Podcast, your one-stop shop for stocking up on the information you need to qualify for the Pro Tour. I am Alex Midas. He is Jacob Negro. Jacob, my friend, how's it going?
Pretty good. Just had a fun birthday weekend in Durango, Colorado. Took this train to Silverton, so that was really nice.
Happy birthday, man.
Thanks.
That's pretty cool. So a little birdie told me that there's been a rule change in Magic the Gathering. What do you know about that?
Yeah, so it says as of Final Fantasy's release, which might mean pre-release, it might mean a week after pre-release. I would guess pre-release from what I know. It's about how sagas work, and they're making this change because in Final Fantasy there's these summons, which are saga creatures. So they want to make these play out a little bit more intuitively. Effectively, the change, in simpler terms, I actually don't have it in front of me, is if a saga loses all of its abilities, by the current rules, the saga just immediately gets sacrificed. And that's because the rules of sagas say if they have a number of lore counters on them greater than or equal to like their number of chapters, and none of its abilities are on the stack, you sacrifice it. So if it has no abilities, it would mean it always has a number of lore counters, even if it's 0, greater than or equal to its number of chapters, and it has nothing on the stack, so therefore you sacrifice it. So they're changing that so now you do not sacrifice it. It won't continue to go through its lore counters. It'll maintain any lore counters it already has. I actually don't know on the top of my head if you play a new saga that maybe if there was like a reason it couldn't have abilities. I don't know if it enters as 1 counter. My guess is yes. But I'm actually unsure on that. Not that it matters a whole lot, but if set effect gets removed, it will. And this change, I think, is going to be pretty impactful to Modern, because the actual most likely saga to lose all of its abilities is Urza's Saga, which is the enchantment land that's really powerful in Modern. Seen tons of play since it's been printed, and previously, the most common way that land would lose all abilities are Blood Moon and the like. I'm going to call them Blood Moon effects, but what I mean by them are mostly Blood Moon, Magus of the Moon, and Harbinger of the Seas. But there's some other cards in that category. Spreading Seas would do it as well, and Alpine Moon would do it as well. But those 3 are the big 3 for sure. Previously, if you played one of those, all Urza Sagas in play would instantly die. And also, if somebody tried to play an Urza Saga, it would also instantly die before they could even tap it for mana, even though it is a mountain or island, respectively. So I think it's a pretty big deal, because Amulet Titan is a deck that plays Urza Saga right now, and they're pretty weak to Blood Moon effects. They're still going to be weak to those, but now, they don't just lose out on their lands. And then there's a really interesting kind of layer of rules within that. This isn't actually a rules change, but it's just kind of a result of the rules change. Blood Moon and the like will remove all abilities from these lands when it changes their types, but they don't remove abilities granted by other effects. Now, it's pretty weird to say that Urza Saga's lines of text saying this gains add 1 colorless and this gains 2 tap make a construct are text granted by other effects, but that's what it is, even though the card is the other effect itself. It's granting itself those text boxes. So those don't go away if that land becomes a mountain or islands due to Blood Moon or Harbinger. Previously, it didn't matter because the land got instantly sacrificed. But what it means now is if there's an Urza Saga in play already on Chapter 2, and someone plays a Blood Moon, not only will that saga not go away anymore, it'll also maintain the ability to make constructs for as long as it's in play. And it won't naturally run out its life cycle as a saga either, which means the rest of the game you can make constructs. So I think that's a pretty huge deal. Last week I mentioned we went over the Affinity deck, which is already a Mox Opal Urza Saga deck, and I think, they had a good reason to not play Blood Moon before in their sideboard or even main deck because they didn't want to ruin their own Urza Sagas. But now they kind of have incentive to play those cards. So I think that's going to be a huge boost to that deck, and also just a huge boost to all Urza Saga decks in general because they're going to be a little less soft to Blood Moon, or maybe just not soft at all to Blood
Moon. Wow, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so I really think that'll change how a lot of things... here's an example. The blue-black Murktide deck against the Amulet Titan deck. I think it wasn't uncommon for the blue-black Murktide deck to even cut all or some of its Urza Sagas post-board because they're expecting Harbinger of the Seas. But, a deck full of counter magic, Urza Saga is kind of like a really perfect threat. It's an uncounterable way to get some board presence. And now their sideboard card isn't even really good against Saga. It's still going to be good against your deck, but now I think they're probably going to leave all their Sagas in. and that's going to be a main game plan to kind of navigate against counter magic and let them get some pressure on the board.
So, and perhaps unintentional pretty big buff to Urza Saga then, huh?
Yeah, definitely.
Already one of the best cards in Modern.
Yep.
Huh.
That being said, I think the rules change is like smart. You can't just always focus on specific interactions like this, and I kind of agree that these creature sagas, it sure would be nice if they didn't just die instantly if they lost all their abilities. In Standard, there's Tidebinder Mage as an example of something that could do that. So I think it's more intuitive that these cards don't just instantly die just because they have no abilities.
So I agree with that, and rules changes will matter for forever, basically. So it would be short-sighted to be stopped from making an intuitive rules change for just one interaction in present time. Although I will say, it's still not very intuitive to me that if your opponent has Urza Saga in play and you play a Blood Moon, that it, instead of becoming a mountain, it becomes a mountain that has 2 in a tap, make a contact.
Yeah, that part is certainly not intuitive, and yeah, that's just kind of how layers work. But
I'm a little surprised they didn't just go around that. But
they still could. The rules ultimately are just some words that Wizards decides that that's the way the cards work, and those are totally changeable.
Right. Well, that'll be interesting to keep an eye on. Certainly, we'll be covering it here on the podcast next time we do a Modern episode, especially if those Modern episodes includes decks with Urza Saga and or Blood Moon, etc. Which
it has me excited to play some Affinity featuring maybe even a main deck copy of one of those Blood Moon effects. Because
that sounds pretty funny. In a way, you're powering up your Saga by playing it.
Exactly. Time. And also, I think that, Mox Opal and Blood Moon effects are kind of friends. You get to accelerate it out, and you have a permanent in play that's tapping for any color anyways. So they already kind of want something like that, potentially.
Makes sense. Well, for today's episode, we're not going to be covering Modern. We're going to be covering Final Fantasy, which I suppose may include Modern. We've decided to do a top 10 list for fun. Me and Jacob each individually made a top 10 list. So we may have overlapping cards. In fact, we probably will. And when we get to that, like if Jacob's number 10 is my number 5, say, we'll bring that up and we'll talk about the card at the same time. We haven't seen each other's lists yet, so we don't know. In general, Jacob, what do you think about this set? Are you a big Final Fantasy fan?
I've never played the games. Doesn't really bother me as much as I think most people get bothered about Universes Beyond. The cards look pretty magical to me, to be honest. They don't seem very completely out of place when I read them. They look like characters that could exist in the Magic universe.
When I first heard about Universes Beyond, I was pretty unhappy about it. But I might be wrong. Final Fantasy definitely fits really well, and I think it's no surprise it's not by accident, that the 2 first Universe Beyond sets that are mainstream were Lord of the Rings and Final Fantasy. I mean, both of those fit pretty well with Magic's IP. I think the real test will be the Spider-Man set, for instance, which is a pretty jarring difference.
Yeah, I agree. Some of the sets have been jarring to me, and you mentioned Lord of the Rings and Final Fantasy fitting with Magic's IP. I suspect that's because Lord of the Rings and Tolkien in general inspired Magic and Final Fantasy. And there's probably even a precursor to that, but that's kind of why they all fit together, is because they're actually all just inspired from Lord of the Rings, from what I can tell. So
right. Yeah. As for my history with Final Fantasy, it's always been one of those games where, like, I have played a couple of them, and I've always wanted to play more. I actually own more Final Fantasy games than I've played, so I plan on playing them. Yeah. But they're long games and so much to do in life, So hopefully I'll get to it, but. I know the big characters, but there's definitely plenty of characters in this set that I don't even know, and it doesn't bother me at all. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's some cards I read, and I think I can just tell they're really flavorful without ever even playing the game. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I feel like I learned about the game from reading the cards.
Yeah. We'll see. I'm ready. If Spider-Man comes along and I like the Spider-Man set, I will say Universes Beyond is a success, but... Okay, well... we'll get started then. Do you have any honorable mentions?
Yeah, I added one as an honorable mention because, I kind of, to make this list, I went through Scryfall, wrote down every card that I thought it could maybe make this list, maybe got to 16 or 17 total cards, to be honest with you. Not that impressive to me, and then immediately cut a few that after rereading and thinking about it I didn't like. But there's one that I think might see play, but it's pretty narrow, and that's Ancient Adamantoise, which I'll read. It's 5 green, 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 so 8 total mana. That matters. It's a creature turtle. It has 8 power and 20 toughness. It has Vigilance, Ward 3. It says, damage isn't removed from this creature during cleanup steps, so that means the damage is going to be sticky. All damage that would be dealt to you and other permanents you control is dealt to this creature instead, and when this creature dies, exile it and create 10 tapped treasure tokens. And this card just came onto my list. Last week I brought up the up-and-coming Neoform deck, which cheats 8 drops into play, and I think this being a green 8-drop with kind of a unique effect might be kind of useful in the sideboard. It kind of gains you 20 life. Is hard to kill. It has 8 power and vigilance, so it might just beat your opponent before they can race you. And also, if they kill it, you get 10 treasure tokens, which kind of unlocks just hard casting all the random other threats in your deck.
And it's got Word 3. Wow, that's funny. I'm glad I have you on the podcast. I barely even looked at that card.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I saw it and it just screamed Commander. It's a cool card. It's flavorful. It's like a boss fight in a card.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
Similar for me. I had about 15 or 16 cards that I thought could make the list, and some had to go. So I decided that 2 of them I would mention are cards that I definitely think are going to see play, probably even cross format, but they're pretty niche, and they're definitely only like kind of just small upgrades to cards that already see play. So the first one I have is Fire Magic. This is a 1 red instant, deal 1 damage to each creature. Then you can pay 2 extra mana, so 3 mana total, and it does 2 damage to each creature, or you can pay 5 extra generic mana, so 6 total, deal 3 damage to each creature. So, I think just as a sideboard card, I think the 1 mana version is pretty good. There's in Pioneer, there's Electrickery, which essentially does the 1 mana version, but that's really narrow. And so at least with this card, if your opponent's creatures get pumped, or maybe if they have some bigger creatures, you could pay more mana and get a bigger effect. So I think that's...
Yeah, Fire Magic is actually on my list.
Okay. I'm not surprised. I thought about putting it on mine too, but kind of for the reasons that I explained.
It makes sense as an honorable mention as well. I just think they've made a lot of effects, including ones maybe even a little better than Electrickery, that do similar things to the first mana mode, but not usually at instant speed for some of these other ones, which I guess Electrickery is instant. But then, kind of the ability to kick it into something bigger, I think is a pretty big deal. I think it'll only see play if you're putting it in your sideboard for a deck for the 1 mana mode, but
yeah, that's kind of how I think of it.
It gives you a lot more coverage than that is I think going to mean it's going to see a lot more play than these other cards, which have felt a little narrow in the past.
Totally. And when I first read it, I thought, man, 6 mana for 3 damage is a really bad rate. But if you're really just paying for the other modes, and then sometimes you'll get the blowout, you'll wrath your opponent.
Yeah, if this card sees play, people are going to end up spending 6 mana on it and having cool stories about it all the time, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. And then my other card is Dreams of Laguna, which is 1 and a blue instant. Let me find it here. It says Surveil 1, draw a card. It has flashback for 3 and a blue. So think twice, my friend, you have fallen.
Maybe.
So I think this is a strict upgrade to Think Twice. Deduce is already probably better than Think Twice in most situations. I actually think it's better than Deduce too.
Think Twice isn't standard, and I've once considered it in kind of those blue-white control shells, just because Deduce doesn't play well with Temporary Lockdown, and at the time,
right.
Hopeless Nightmare was seeing a lot of play, and I thought it was kind of cute that you could discard it to Hopeless Nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Or I was toying around with a Sultai deck that had the Vanekeeper's Familiar that surveilled 3, and it had Rakshas's Bargain, which milled, so, it was pretty easy to get Think Twice into the graveyard, that sort of thing. Flashback has real upside to Deduce, and again, Blue-White Control and Pioneer usually plays with Deduce, and Lockdown hits that, so I think this could see play there as an upgrade, potentially. I think the Surveil's a huge deal.
Surveil is a huge deal, if you can compare Consider to just a card that cycles, nobody's playing the cards that cycle, but they're playing lots of Considers.
Exactly. So those are my honorable mentions. Love seeing I Think Twice. I can't really tell what's going on with the art and the flavor text on it, but anyways, it's neither here nor there. So what's your number 10, Jacob?
My number 10 is also kind of a narrow card, but I think it'll show up a lot and maybe even multi-format. It's the Wandering Minstrel, which I'll read the whole card, but when I'm done, I'll mention really only the first line of text is the one that I care about here. So the Wandering Minstrel costs a green and a blue, 2 total mana. Legendary creature, Human Bard. It's a 1/3. And the most important line here is it says, lands you control enter untapped. It also says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 5 or more towns, which is a land type in this set, create a 2/2 elemental creature token that's all colors, and you can pay 3 and 1 of each other of all the colors, so 8 total mana, to give other creatures you control +X until end of turn, where X is the number of towns you control. The most obvious home for this is in Amulet in Modern. It does a similar thing to Spelunking and Amulet, not in multiples, but that deck, it kind of comes in and out, but Green Sun Zenith has been kind of a feature of that deck, so something you can tutor just gives you a lot more effective copies of that effect. It's just making that deck kind of more reliably always having their lands, at least the first copy of these effects, like their lands are just going to enter untapped. It's going to be totally normal. In addition to that, maybe in Standard, Temur Analyst, I've tried it a little since rotation. I don't think it's very good, but it's really reliant on Spelunking right now, and this is just another effective copy of a worse Spelunking, I would say, but it gives a little bit more redundancy if you're trying to make your deck work by filling it with Fabled Passage and Evolving Wilds and all the other weird Evolving Wilds in Standard.
Okay. I did look at this card, and obviously the only thing I thought it might be good for is Amulet. It's cool that it's tutorable from Green Sun Zenith, but I just wasn't sure if this was something that they wanted or not.
I've talked to some people, I see what they mention. I think they're not sure either, but I'm sure people will be trying it.
If there's a flaw with my list, it's that I probably overemphasized everything for Standard. I haven't played a ton of Modern, and I have been playing Standard and even some Pioneer, so most of my lens is looking at cards through that, and I was kind of just banking on you catching the Modern cards.
Yeah, I think that's for the best, because I was really trying to view it from a Modern perspective right now. That being said, I guess I've seen some Analyst decks pop up in Pioneer every now and then too, so maybe they're also going to be interested in this in Pioneer.
Okay.
There's like Spelunking, Scapeshift weird combos too, that like can also only win if they have Spelunking in play. So
gotcha. So for my number 10, let me find it here. I've got Yuna, Hope of Spira, 3 green white for a 3/5, so 5 mana. Legendary creature, Human Cleric. During your turn, Yuna and enchantment creatures you control have Trample, Lifelink, and Ward 2. At the beginning of your end step, return up to 1 target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Do you like this card at all?
Yeah, no, I've looked at it a little bit. Definitely just in the context of Standard. I think it makes sense with all the overlords.
Pioneer. It seems like just a good rate. It's sort of a reanimation card. I mean, in theory, I think you could consider splashing this in an Omniscience deck. It gives that kind of game 2 grindier aspect where it's more than just a one-shot. Instead of just getting back an enchantment, you get it back, and then they probably, if you do it right, you get the Ward 2 on your turn, so maybe they don't kill the Yuna, so you get one thing back, and then you have 2 threats to deal with for them to deal with, otherwise you get something back again.
Yeah, absolutely. The Ward 2 on your turn is pretty great text for making it to your end step. It's pretty hard for your opponent to pass, not only with a way to answer a 3/5, but also with 2 extra mana.
5 mana, clues off a Beanstalk. It just seems like a card that could fit into Standard nicely, maybe not create its own archetype, but seems like the type of grindy,
Yeah, absolutely.
5-drop that would be pretty good.
And these overlords are going to be around for a while too, so there might be a better way to get them into your graveyard or things like that.
Exactly. Or maybe you want to explore different colors. I mean, green and white, I guess, fits pretty well with the
2 best
overlord decks right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Got a number 9 for us?
Yeah, my number 9 card is Cloud Midgar Mercenary.
Okay, so this is my number 4 card.
Got it.
So
yeah, so
like it.
Cloud is a white for a 2/1 legendary creature human soldier mercenary. When Cloud enters, search your library for an equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. As long as Cloud is equipped, if an ability of Cloud or an ability equipment attached to it triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So, very reminiscent of Stoneforge Mystic. I will say, I think in the context of modern or older formats, this is pretty much just going to be worse than Stoneforge Mystic. The ability to cheat in the equipment, Call of Your Complete, sometimes Batterskull still, pretty huge deal. Compared to this, kind of needs this to stay in play and get equipped, and then that equipment to kind of have triggered abilities to come up. But in Standard and Pioneer, there is no Stoneforge Mystic, so this card's going to offer, I think, something pretty useful to those formats for potential decks that want some equipments.
It is very similar to Stoneforge. It is a 2-1. It's a pretty big difference, for especially if you're building like a beatdown deck.
Yeah.
It could be Stoneforge Mystic 5 and 6 for your modern deck.
Yeah,
Hammer
definitely.
time, something like that. One thing I like about this set is there's a lot of support for its own cards within the set. So it makes me think that there's going to be some new archetypes, and maybe they'll be tier 2 in standard, but that's fine. There's lots of equipment support in this set. The reason I have it so high, there's this Gilgamesh Master at Arms, which is this 6-mana red Titan, basically. When it enters or attacks, you look at the top, 7, I believe? Let me find it.
Top 6.
Top 6 of your library, you find all the equipment there and put them into play. And then you also get to equip them to any samurai you have, which the Titan's a samurai, and there's some other decent samurai. There's a red 2/2 legendary creature called Raban, Bull of Alamiga.
Yeah, that card is on my list, actually.
Okay. Yeah, so I thought about putting some of these other cards instead of Cloud for standard, but I figured I'd just talk about them all at the same time, since Cloud feels like the kind of standout, or at least flag post type of thing. But so I'll read Raban, however you say his name. So this is a 1 in red 2/2 with Ward. You have to pay life equal to its power, and whenever he attacks, you attach him to one target equipment you control to target attacking creature. So any equipment that you go get with Cloud or just have in your deck, like if you have the Buster Sword, for instance, which is kind of like the swords of old, but doesn't give protection. It's 3 mana, 2 to equip, gives +3/+2, and whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card, then you may cast a spell from your hand with mana value less than or equal to damage without paying its mana cost. So this Raban guy, if you have him turn 2 and just the Buster Sword on turn 3, you get to attack right away, and if your opponent doesn't have an answer, you get pretty huge advantage right there. I'm curious what number he is on your list, that card.
Yeah, so he's 8. I did kind of pair him with Cloud.
Okay.
For a very specific reason, actually. So, it's kind of outdated and modern nowadays. You can still play it, but there's a Hammer Time deck that at one point I almost thought was the best deck in modern, kind of right around when Urza Saga was printed. And, a lot of those cards in that deck are ported into legal in Pioneer, but it just kind of lacks redundancy in Pioneer. But this, I think, would be a huge piece of the puzzle, because after Sigarda's Aids, the other equippers are really bad. There's Kemba, which requires you to have the hammer in play first, but now there's also this, and I think this is going to be pretty nice, just to set up with Hammer, and I just think that deck might actually be pretty redundant now, especially with Cloud being a tutor for Hammer. So you've got, 8 hammers and more than 8 ways to equip your hammers. And, there's some, you learn this in Modern, but if you play against, a blue-red deck, I guess nowadays so many decks feature bounce spells, but some people just really struggle to deal with something that's equipped with a hammer, and they're really never going to come back from that, even if it's not immediately lethal, or even if they have chump blockers. And this having Ward equal to its power means if you get in a hit with a hammer, they can never kill it.
Or if they do, they take a bunch of damage. It's kind of on brand for your red deck.
Yeah. I kind of think it would be worth exploring like a hammer deck in Pioneer now. I looked it up before this, and I see people are trying it with Bright Glass Gearhulk, which makes sense because it can get both halves of the combo in one trigger.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's kind of slow and clunky, which kind of defeats the purpose. A nice part about these hammer decks is that they can attack for a lot on turn 2 or 3.
It doesn't even stop there. There's even more equipment.
Yeah, in the set, there's even more. There's another 1 mana, it's blue, right? To equip. It might be red.
Which one
Maybe
are
I'm
we
mixing
talking
up.
about?
Yeah, I'm bad.
The
I don't know the name.
Planisphere, maybe? The one that's
No.
like a Quirion Dryad? No.
Um,
Oh, you're talking about the blue instant.
that can equip one of.
You gain control of an equipment. And
Yeah, it's
equip it.
magnetic theft, but blue and a little bit different. But yeah, that's another way to equip a hammer.
Mm-hmm.
And you know,
And then-
the payoff for equipping there's no Inkmoth Nexus, but the payoff for equipping a hammer in Pioneer is not very different from the payoff of equipping hammer in Modern. And even though it's a little outclassed in Modern to be trying to do that, that's because there's things like Force of Vigor just completely like blowing you out for no mana. And that being in Pioneer, I just think it might be like pretty real in the format. That's a little lower power level.
I could see. So some of these cards I'm about to mention probably aren't really for like the Modern deck, but there's just so many equipment stuff even for Standard. There's the Freya Crescent, red 1/1. It has flying to your turn. You could tap to add red for equipment spells only. That's pretty decent. Furion Wild Rose Warrior. Equip creatures. It's a 3-mana 3/3. Equip creatures you control of haste. Whenever a non-token equipment enters, you create a token until its turn, and it costs 2 less to equip. So you
Yeah,
get, like, a
not
haste
enough
attack.
with hammer, but yeah.
No.
But
And
equipment decks in general, I see your point.
I'm just
yeah.
thinking in Standard, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because all these cards are legendary, which is another theme we're going to get to. So, you know, you're going to put like 2 of every one of these cards in your red-white equipment deck, maybe, which is interesting. You could probably still play 4 Cloud. But yeah, it's kind of wild how many legendary creatures are in this set, by the way.
Yeah, that's gonna probably par for the course for Universes Beyond, because
Maybe. It could be a Final
universes
Fantasy
are
specific
also
thing, to be
yeah,
fair.
but all of the universes are about their characters that you like,
That's
right?
true. Yeah. And they can't forget anyone's character, because how would they
Yeah,
make a
you
commander
gotta
deck with
you
it?
gotta include all the characters. I agree.
Yeah. I even wrote down, like, I could see a blue-white artifact deck maybe be good as in Standard. Do you know what the Aether Spark it does in its synergy with Cloud?
Yeah, yeah, I'm pretty familiar with the Aether Spark. So yeah,
Okay.
it gets double counters if it's equipped to Cloud, which is pretty nice. The activated abilities won't be doubled, but it'll get double loyalty.
Right. Yeah. So it'll get double loyalty. You can play that on turn 4. Maybe if you had a crazy good draw and played the 1 mana creature on turn 1, you could do this on turn 3. So I think that's a decent synergy. You could just play 1.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty nice. I've when I was playing the mice deck at the last PT, we tried some copies of Aether Spark. Didn't end up feeling good enough, but
Okay.
it's nice that you could put 1 in your Cloud deck and effectively have a lot of copies, because it's certainly good in slower matchups. It's a really annoying Planeswalker to deal with. And anybody that drafted lots of Aether Drift or played Sealed, it's also like the best possible card you could open, basically. So
I don't know if this card's on your list. It's not on mine, but it's an interesting card in the set. It's called Jill, Shiva's Dominant. 2 and a blue, 2/2. It's basically a mana war for non-land permanents.
it's
And
not on my
it's-
list, but I know the card. It was one I wrote down and got rid of.
Yeah, that's what sounds about right. You pay 5 and tap it, transform it into a 4/5. The problem is when you transform it, its abilities aren't that great. It says target creatures can't be blocked this turn and like tap all lands your
Yeah.
opponent's control. But you know, if you have an equipment deck, maybe you need to get your Buster Sword through. I mean, this does quite a lot for getting blockers out of the way. So
Yeah, and then the
There's some
Saga
good blue
half at the
equipment.
end it flips back too. So it's
Exactly.
not like you're getting rid of a body, like you get to bounce something again.
and then you're a creature there, and then you bounce something. Yeah, so some pretty cool stuff. Maybe when I was making this set, I originally started thinking like, can this beat the Steel Cutter decks? And mostly I came up with the answer was no. But
Yeah.
you know, you have to grade the cards. I realized against the set, not all of.
Yeah, and
Standard.
in a month from now, who knows? Steel Cutter could be banned, or also rotations coming up in August, I think. So things just might be
or they
different.
print some super powerful artifact hate or something like that. Who knows?
Yeah.
Things change. Yeah. Okay, so I'm lost. Where are we?
You should be on your number 8 card probably, or actually, you never
number
did your number
9.
9. Yeah, because I
Yeah.
skipped. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got I don't know how to say it. Let me get to it, and then I'm gonna try to pronounce it. I've got Nibelheim, a flame. 2
Is that-
red sorcery. Choose target creature you control. It deals damage equal to its power to each other creature. If this spell was cast from your graveyard, discard your hand and draw 4 cards. And has flashback for 5 red. So I think this kind of card really makes you want to play with like a black-red mid-range deck, probably. Maybe with the 2/4 Death Touch Vampire. I think it's a pretty good sweeper for a creature-on-creature matchup. And the fact that it just sits in your graveyard if your opponent ever rebuilds, and you get to do it again and even draw cards off of it the next time, this seems like a nightmare for creature-on-creature matchups.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about the number of Death Touch things. There's also Unstoppable Slasher. There's a creature on my list too, Cecil, which is a new Death Touch creature as well. That's pretty synergistic. I guess I kind of question the setup of it a little bit, just a 4-mana sorcery that can get blown out by a removal spell.
You don't have to do it, and maybe it's a cyber card for creature matchups where there's not quite as much removal being thrown around.
Yeah.
It just seems like the type of card that in the matchups it's good, it would totally dominate.
Yeah, I think...
Especially, a lot of creatures, a lot of beatdown decks say, if you're a bigger mid-range deck and you want a card against a beatdown deck, you maybe don't want to play sweepers because you have your own creatures, but usually your creatures are bigger than theirs, and you're just trying to stabilize. I could even see this being good in like mid-range mirrors.
Yeah, I kind of understand the context you're saying. There's been a lot of those decks in the past that kind of just throw out a lot of the best creatures in Standard, and that would be pretty good there. But I guess right now, playing a lot of Standard, I don't know if that's really the case.
That's fair. You certainly wouldn't want it against like Beanstalk decks. I don't know. You could still do decent again. You could kill a lot of tokens with it. It wouldn't be the worst.
Yeah. It's awkward that it gets your other creatures too.
It does. You could maybe get around that in some board states. Target your smaller creature.
Yep.
Still kill your opponents. I think it was a card I wasn't even going to include, but thinking about it, I think it might be a bit of a sleeper. We'll see. I like it. What do you got for us? You on number 8?
Well, my number 8 was Raban. So how about you go to your number 8?
Number 8, I decided to put Vivi Ornithir at number 8.
Got it. That is my number 1.
I'm not as big of a believer, but I do think it's good. I put it on the top 10. I did have a hard time ordering my top 10, and I definitely didn't do it correctly, but at some point I had to give up. So
yeah, of course.
This is where Vivi is. So I'm going to read it. 1 blue-red, 0/3, legendary creature wizard, 0 mana to activate at X mana in any combination of blue and or red, where X is Vivi's power, and you can only do this during your turn and only once each turn. And then whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Vivi, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So why do you like this card so much if it's your number 1? Then maybe I'll talk you down a little bit.
Yeah, so I actually like it a little bit more looking at Modern. That being said, the best deck in Standard right now is a blue-red prowess deck, and I think Vivi's going to fit in. On turn 4, you can play this, play a 1-mana spell, use its ability, play another 1-mana spell. You've already immediately gotten in 2 damage. The Vivi gave you a mana back, and now it's a 2/5, which is actually kind of hard to kill. And I think it's just really threatening. Like, it's really brutal for your opponent anytime you untap with this, and if they answer it right away, it's not that bad for you if it gave you a little bit of mana back the turn you played it. Obviously, sometimes you can get no mana back if they answer it at instant speed. In Modern, specifically, I just think there's a lot of 0 mana spells, and that starts really changing the course of what you can do with this. It's a legend, so Mox Amber being one of those 1 mana spells means you can just play this, play Mox Amber, have 2 mana right away. It pairs really well with card draw spells. Expressive Iteration is kind of perfect for this in Modern, I think. You could even get kind of cute and do stuff like Mutagenic Growth it the turn you play it, start going up mana the turn you play it. I just think it has a lot of potential as a card, and I think that even the bottom line of text of getting a counter and dealing 1 to each opponent, that's better than like double prowess. Like, it's like half the prowess is haste. It works on your opponent's turn. It doesn't matter if it gets blocked, and then the other half is permanent prowess.
So it's possible I should have put this higher. Some things I like about it. I like that it's pretty easy to do a couple points of damage with it whenever you play it, if that's what you need. It's pretty easy to be up on mana with it. But still, overall, it's a 3 mana legendary sorcery creature. Doesn't really gain any inherent card advantage. and it only goes in some pretty narrow decks, I think. Like, I think there's a chance you'll put 2 in your Izzet deck in Standard, and that'll be good. But I don't know. It doesn't seem that much better than playing Stock Up or something of that nature. Of course, they're good together. It is good with the Otter card, the Talent, the blue Talent.
Yes. Yeah, it's very nice with that mana sink.
That's sort of just, I mean, the blue Talent's just an insanely good card, though. So I do think it's good. Maybe I should have put it higher. I don't know. I like the other cards on the list, too.
It's just, I think it just has a lot of potential. And, also, yeah, you can really, if you really want to try doing some crazy stuff with it, you can play this and then play a scale up on it in Modern, and it's got 7 power. Like, you can really go up on mana if you're willing to put some bump spells in your deck.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah,
I don't really know what you
find a
do
way
with
to give
that,
it.
though.
I think the simplest thing to do is find a way to give it haste, and
Sure.
Corey Steelcutter is already an equipment that gives trample and haste, so that might
Trample
just be
Ace.
the thing to do. But
it's naturally the Homostory Steelcutter, and that's one of the most broken cards out there at the moment. So maybe that alone is a reason to give it a higher grade. But I like it. I like it.
There's already
Final Fantasy 2.
I guess I'll talk about it. I mentioned the Affinity deck at the beginning of the podcast. That deck has 12 0-mana cards already. It's already a Steelcutter deck. Also, kind of cutely, you're kind of looking for card draw effects, I think, if you play VV. It's a wizard, so it plays well with Flame of Anor. And Flame of Anor, also in that deck, is turned online with literally every creature I mentioned. Emery, Tameo, VV, and Magus or Harbinger, they're literally all wizards. And you didn't even play them because they're wizards, which is kind of funny.
I forgot about Flame of Anor. That's pretty nice. There's not like a subset of there's not so many good wizards in Modern where you're just, you're not looking for new ones. Like if a new good wizard comes along, there's definitely ones you'd be happy to cut to try it. So, yeah, I could see it. Yeah, I could also see, honestly, to be honest, I could also see though if it just people try it and it's just not that good and then they take it out. So we'll
it's a card that I think will do some really powerful things, but I do agree with you that I'm not that interested in putting a lot of 4 copies of this card in almost any deck. It's a clunky legendary card. It takes a little bit of setup. Yeah, but I do think it's going to present this axis of the game that maybe is not what your opponent's prepared for in a lot of spots where you just play it and maybe you cast 1 or 2 spells before even zeroing it, cast some more spells, they already take some damage, and then from there this thing's just in play that if they let you untap with, you're just gonna spend all your mana from your lands and then activate this, and it's gonna make 7 more mana. And if you have the ability to turn that into things like Flame of Anor or Stock Up or Expressive Iteration, I think you'll win pretty easily.
I bet this card's expensive. I haven't really looked at the price, but it's a mythic rare, and I bet it is very good in Commander. I don't even play Commander.
Yeah, it looks like a great Commander.
A great Commander.
I'll add another note. I actually haven't thought about this too deeply, but the ability is pretty sweet under Agatha's Soul Cauldron as well.
Oh. Man, that card's if you want to stump Alex, you put Agatha's Soul Cauldron in front of him. I guess this is pretty good. It just naturally gives itself counters, and you can pay mana, tap to the cauldron and all that.
Yeah, if you can get it under a cauldron, then all of your creatures get this 0 mana ability, and their power is going to be anything. It's not like it cares how many counters it has on it. It just cares about its power.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. All right, number 7. What do you got for number 7?
I have Matoya Archon Elder.
Okay.
So 2 and a blue. Legendary creature, human warlock, 1/4. Whenever you scry or surveil, draw a card, which says in reminder text, draw after you scry or surveil. So you'll resolve this whole card or whatever effect is scrying or surveilling, and then draw a card after. I have this up here because I think, it's not limited once per turn, and it's kind of a sweet build around, especially thinking about Modern, where, actually even in Standard and Pioneer, the surveil lands are legal, but in Modern you have this luxury of maybe putting, if you're going to play this card, maybe putting 3 or even 4 surveil lands in your deck, but then just a bunch of fetch lands. So you can play it, immediately get value. That is, kind of like a cute play. There's also Preordain and Consider. The thing I'm most excited for with this in Modern is to pair it with Dragon's Rage Channeler, which just says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you surveil one. Wow. There's no limit to that. both get to play this card with the cards I already mentioned, and maybe the turn you play it, you get a card out of it. So even if they kill it, it's not that bad. But I think there's some real combo draw your whole deck potential, because Dragon's Rage Chandler only costs one. Like as you're comboing off, you could just probably find ways to play more copies of them. Find Moxen or whatever. There's ones that work and go up mana and maybe win somehow. All with cards that maybe don't have to be that bad, even if you're not comboing.
That sounds pretty good. It is legendary, so you can't have more of it, but could be fine.
It seems like the type of card, though, that's generating a lot of card advantage pretty easily with the fetch land, surveil land, and preordained type stuff, that, like, if you have one in play and you draw more copies of it, I think you'll be happy that you started your turn with this guy in play.
Yeah, this is definitely an example of me being blind to modern stuff. I sort of just looked at like Pioneer and Standard. I was like, this is too slow. There's no way.
It's really Dragon's Rage Chandler that makes me think it bumps it up from not
lands.
Slow. Yeah, but the fact that there's a 1 mana
even
strong creature that just combos with this to turn any non-creature spell you have into draw a card.
Yeah, nice eye. Yeah, this does seem like a good modern card. I don't think you would play this in Standard mostly.
Yeah, you have Opt and Surveil lands, but that's
pretty much
I think not what you want to be doing with this card.
Up, probably.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, cool card. Number 7, I have Emmett Selch, Unsundered. This guy on your list at all?
No.
Oh, what a bummer. I hope this card's good.
I've read it a few times.
Sweet. Oh, you still don't like it. So 1 blue-black, 2/4 Vigilance. Whenever Emmett Selch enters or attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 14 or more cards in your graveyard, you may transform it. It transforms into Hades, Sorcerer of Eld, 6/6 Vigilance. During your turn, you may play cards from your graveyard. If a card or token would be put into your graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. So on its face, it's really not that much worse than the 2/4 Vampire with Death Touch, I don't think. And it has a lot more going on for it in the terms of synergies. So self-mill obviously comes to mind, or really I think probably the main thing you do with it is use it to set up a reanimation. So you can play a deck that mills to try to get your reanimation target. There's a lot of 4-mana reanimation in Standard at the moment. And even if your opponent in a cyber game or something, your opponent has Rest in Peace, this thing is still attacking, blocking, looting. Seems like a lot for 3 mana.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. This card's pretty good. I think maybe I was getting too attached to kind of referencing, I guess, Lear, Disciple of the Drowned is the card that comes to mind, and I didn't like that this card always gave your opponent a turn to untap and answer it.
That's true. I don't really see it as a card that you're like trying to flip. I mean, it's pretty hard to flip 14 cards.
Yeah, you're seeing
I mostly see it as like an engine card that's efficient for turn 3, and then it just sort of sits in play, and if they don't answer it, it eventually becomes something really hard to deal with.
I agree with you there. I like that view of it. I think I don't quite agree with you comparing it to Preacher of the Schism, but I do think there are decks that want to reanimate things in Standard. So if you're looking for a looter, this actually does seem like one of the stronger looters you could ever play.
Yeah, and then there's like Sultai, self-mill cards, what did I write down here, that are in Standard. Stillness in Motion's kind of a cool card that self-mills you really fast.
Yeah, it does.
There's Jace the Perfected Mind, Scavenger's Talent's a card that's not very good, but it does it. Overlord of the Bale Merc. There's this card called Nashi, Searcher in the Dark, blue and a black. I think it's like a 2/2. You could curve into this, that's pretty decent. Hits your enchantments and whatnot. Awaken the Honored Dead is a removal spell, like a Maelstrom Pulse that mills you some. Rakshas's Bargain. So there might be a deck there. There's the new reanimation target from this set, Summon Bahamut.
Yep.
It's a pretty sweet card. It might not be better than just getting back Valgavoth, but I'm sure it's in the running. 9 mana, 9/9 flying, Saga. 1 and 2 is destroy 1 non-land permanent. 3 is draw 2 cards, and 4 is this creature deals damage equal to the total mana value of other permanents you control to each opponent. So pretty nice reanimation targets in Standard at the moment.
Yeah, I thought about that a bit too. It lines up pretty well. Obviously, it can just get killed, but it's still got destroy a non-land permanent on the ETB, and then it attacks for 9 twice and goes away, and as long as you have like anything in play, it would just lethal your opponent at the end if they didn't already die to 2 hits for 9. So
yeah. Some ways worse than Valgavoth, probably.
It's vulnerable, that's for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I think this guy's got a chance.
Yeah, I think you're right.
The Niv Mizzet deck also likes gold 2-drops, and I'm always on the lookout for in Pioneer.
Yeah, what
Any
that
really
was 3
efficient
drop
gold
but
card.
yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say 2-drops. I meant to say 2 color gold cards. My bad. But yeah, cool. You got a number 6 for us?
Yeah, my number 6, actually a little bit more in the context of standard, I think, is Cecil, Dark Knight. Cost a single black, legendary creature, human knight, 2/3. Death Touch. Whenever Cecil deals damage, you lose that much life. Then, if your life total is less than or equal to half your starting life total, untap Cecil and transform it. The Transformed is a legendary creature, human knight. It's white, 4/4 lifelink, and it says whenever Cecil attacks, other attacking creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. I kind of think this card just might be solid. I think you just have to be a little aggressively slanted, but you know, a 1-mana 2/3 Death Touch is a lot of stats. Obviously, it makes you lose some life, so that's a little scary. But I think a lot of the times there's a lot of threat going on here, where like a lot of creatures can't attack into a 2/3 Death Touch, and even just kill it. And even if they do, you only spent 1 mana, so like trading it off is fine. And then it kind of threatens your opponent. I think it won't be that common that you play this on turn 1 and attack with it and transform it, but I think it's going to like play as an early game 2/3 Death Touch that contests the board really well, eventually trades with something, and it costs 1 mana, so trading with something is never going to be that bad. And when you have it later in the game, after a more drawn out game, is where it's more likely to flip, and then a 4/4 lifelink is pretty great deal.
So I picked this card out, and then I thought to myself, if I put this card on my top 10, Jacob's going to make fun of me. He's going to call me an old man, tell me that you can't just play 1 mana, just rate creatures anymore, Alex, and expect it to be good. This reminds me of like the Soldier of the Pantheon days when you could just curve good stuff 1 through 6.
I think 1 is still the nice part about Magic. You know, they haven't really
That's true.
punished things for costing 1.
No,
usually,
definitely
worst case
not.
scenario is your opponent kills it for 1 mana, and that's fine. You know, that's fine
Yeah.
for your cards that cost 1
It's
to trade for 1
legendary.
mana.
It's a little awkward. You probably still are only playing 2 or 3 in
Yeah,
your deck.
the same issue with a lot of cards in
the
this set. It makes deck building kind of weird. I do agree. I don't really want to just put 4. It is nice that if you flip it, you could play another copy, though the untap and transform is mandatory. Also, the untap, pretty real. If you're trying to race someone and this puts you to less than 10 life after it hits your opponent and then transforms and you have a 4/4 lifelink on blocks.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Good card. I wouldn't be surprised if like the Black Midrange decks play this, but it's still just like a creature.
It's kind of boring, but it's
Okay.
I've been looking this is more specific to the mice deck and sideboard cards, but there have been times where I've kind of just wanted to play 1-mana Death Touch creatures in Standard, but they just scale a little too poorly. They don't play out how you want, because the reality is your opponent's not just going to attack into them unless they think it's good for them. You know, they're kind of
Monstrous Rage, and they're going to deal a million to you anyway.
or they're just going to wait around, and it's fine. Toughness. It's kind of like the classic card that gives your opponent options, but in a secret way, where your opponent doesn't have to attack into your Death Touch creature. But this being like a kind of a strong threat means that if that's the case, you could be attacking with it and be pretty happy about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I could see it. It's a nice card. I have another card that I'm almost a little scared I'm going to be called Old Man for liking it, just because I feel like it's so good on rate, but maybe it's not, but maybe it is. So I've got Joshua Phoenix's Dominant, 1 red white, 3/4. When it enters, discard up to 2 cards and draw that many cards, and then you can pay 5 and tap it. Exile Joshua, then return it to the battlefield. Transforms into a 4/4 flying lifelink, and it's Saga, like all these other flip Saga creature things. The first modes for 1 and 2 are it deals 2 damage to each opponent, so it has lifelink, so that's a drain 2. Then the third mode is return any number of target creature cards with total mana value 6 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then you flip Joshua back over. Seems like a really strong card on rate to me. I mean, this just screams like Mardu midrange, maybe red-white. But there's also the blue, like Jeskai deck in Standard that plays the red haste 3/3 that kind of does what this card does.
I agree.
This seems better.
I think whether it's better, kind of up in the air. Haste is kind of a big deal when you're talking about Proph's Eidetic Memory. That card's often a 5/5 haste in that deck. That's a pretty big deal.
That's true. I've never seen that deck use the Lightning Chaser, whatever its name is. I've never seen them use its second ability to any effect whatsoever.
I've had it come up, though. It is random, so it's not always good, but
Yeah, I mean that's part of what I mean.
Yeah,
But
sure.
yeah,
Um, no, I like this card. I think given you viewed it from a standard context, it deserves to be on your top 10 list. Um,
okay,
there's
fair
also a
enough.
Boros
Maybe
Monument
Pioneer.
deck
You
that
know,
has been
seems
popping up a
seems
little bit. That deck's probably going to love this card.
yeah.
Because the
And
haste, I think the haste on Tursa matters a lot less in that deck. I mean, they like having haste threats, but an extra toughness can be a big deal. People are playing a lot of Torch the Tower in standard. And this transforms
Yeah.
into something pretty threatening. I don't think it's a joke. I think you have to be a little worried to use its ability into open mana sometimes, but it's still, even just the threat of activation might mean your opponent's not going to tap out, and then it's not a fun thing to bounce. I'm thinking about Into the Flood Maw being a very played card in Prowess, for example, but that's not necessarily a losing interaction for you if your opponent's leaving up 1 mana to Flood Maw this, and then you just do something else.
Right. The
that's
filtering
nice.
is a pretty big deal too. You just run it out and smooth your hand.
Yeah.
I think there's a good chance Jeskai Control plays this. More like Jeskai mid-range deck.
Yeah, maybe mid-range, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's I mean, they've got like, so what? They've got Beza and Shiva, so just throwing
Shiko.
out
Yeah.
Shiko, yeah, throwing out a big defensive creature on turn 3 that smooths your draws is pretty good. You can set up Shiko with this, and then it's not that good to get back with Shiko, but it's not bad. Like, you can't flip it is the problem. But if you just need 2 blockers or whatever, but just having it in your deck to set up Shiko, and then as a card you could flip, and then it's kind of defensive on the backside also. So I think there's a good chance Jeskai Control, or whatever you want to call it, plays this card.
Makes sense.
I think you're next, right? Are we on number 5?
Yeah, my number 5 was Fire Magic, so we kind of went over that.
Gotcha.
What was your number 5?
I have Ultima.
Ultima, I know it.
Yeah. Let me read it. Pretty simple card. 3 white, sorcery, destroy all creatures and the turn, or destroy all creatures and artifacts and the turn. I think this is a better sweeper than Sunfall, and I think it's likely to be better than Day of Judgment. So the end the turn is similar to Exile in that it stops all dying effects. So like the enchantment creatures from Duskmourn stops the 1/1 mouse from dealing you damage. It also stops, if you play it, your opponent can't activate like Fountain Port at the end of turn, make a token to attack you with. They can't flash in creatures to attack you with. It obviously destroys Steel Cutter, which can be huge if you can actually resolve a 5-mana sorcery against them, which, it's not the end all be all because they have cards like Spell Pierce.
I think right now killing Steel Cutter might be the best part about this card.
Yeah, but it certainly it shores up a lot of things for control decks that I think it's going to be an upgraded Day of Judgment most of the time. And then I wanted to ask you, there's obvious synergy with Teferi Time Raveler in Modern. I wonder if you think that could be something that people do in their tier 2 below control decks or whatever.
They're gonna try it. People love that type of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm showing my lack
during
of
your
knowledge.
opponent's upkeep. Yeah, during your opponent's upkeep, even against the Izzet deck in Modern, if you get to a place where you can resolve this with a Teferi in play, I mean, it's like Time Walk plus Wrath your opponent's board, and pretty good.
Yeah, you might actually know this. Is Teferi legal in Pioneer?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can't do this in Pioneer. I just found
No.
that. Okay.
That being said, you're probably still going to play this card in Pioneer.
Yeah, no, I mean, Steel Cutter's a big deal. We see a lot of people, really the most played sweeper right now is Lockdown because it hits Steel Cutter. It's a big deal. It's cheaper. Those things both matter a lot, but Lockdown's obviously vulnerable, and I'd say a big reason why people right now, you'll see Day of Judgment and almost no Sunfalls is because Prowess and Oculus have access to counter magic, and specifically Spell Pierce really wants your card to be cheaper, but any counter spells, it just matters a lot that your card costs less mana. I've experimented with random one of sweepers like Day of Judgment or Sunfall in Omniscience, and I just ultimately chose Day of Judgment for that reason. Also because, when you're casting Stock Up and stuff like that, the less mana your card costs is a big deal. It could be turn 7 and you could stock up into Day of Judgment, and it matters. But
I totally agree, and I don't think it's just going to take over Day of Judgment slots, but I think it does something important enough.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
It's going to see lots of play in Standard and Pioneer.
Yeah, I think killing Steel Cutter, and if there are things that have die triggers, that's going to matter a lot too, for sure. But
yeah, I mean, that was always kind of the best part of Sunfall, the token was like kind of whatever, at least in my experience.
Yeah, depended on the matchup, but
Yeah, for sure. So I think this has a chance of seeing a lot of play for a while because they don't print cards like this too often, and you know, it's Farewell is a card that people go back to a lot, but I mean 6 mana is just so rough nowadays. I think something like this is you're better suited for.
yeah, makes sense.
What do you got for us next?
My number 4 is Sephiroth, Fabled Soldier. And I don't know why Soldier is all caps. There's probably a in-game reason for that.
Yeah.
Sephiroth, 2 and a black, 3/3, legendary creature, human avatar soldier. When Sephiroth enters or attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, draw a card. Whenever another creature dies, opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. If this is the 4th time this ability has resolved this turn, transform Sephiroth. The other side, Sephiroth, 1-winged angel, 5/5, legendary creature, angel, nightmare, avatar. Flying, Supernova. As this creature transforms into Sephiroth, 1-winged angel, you get an emblem with whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And whenever Sephiroth attacks, you may sacrifice any number of other creatures if you draw that many cards. So it kind of upgrades itself, gets an emblem that's permanent even if they answer it, and the attack trigger now lets you use it basically as many times as you want, though you have to commit all at once, I guess. And yeah, this is on my list because, you know, it's a Blood Artist, which hasn't had a lot of showing in a while, and this costs 1 more than usually all the variants you see of Blood Artists, but A, it does do the original Blood Artist thing, which you don't see much anymore, that it counts your opponent's creatures, so that's pretty nice. And B, this just does something else. It's not just a 2 mana 1/1 or a 2 mana 0/1. It's a real card that I think, you know, you can sack a Young Wolf to it in your Yawgmoth deck, or you can build around in the standard and have fodder for it. It's not just like a card that kind of sucks. You can use it and get value out of it.
This card's sick. I have it number 3 on my list.
Nice, yeah.
I kind of wanted to put it number 1, and then I remembered some other cards, but it is so sweet. It's man, the Magic Boomer in me reads this and just my eyes glaze over with how many things it does.
Yeah, and like in Modern, actually, Blood Artist, or sometimes for various reasons, so now that the One Ring is banned, maybe that's not true, but people play different Blood Artist things, but they're usually one-ofs is like tutor targets for Court of Calling, which I guess for that reason, costing 1 less mana is a big deal, but I just think this might change how some decks are played, because you just might be excited to cast this card. It's not super broken in Modern, you know, it's a 3 mana 3/3, but like if you're sacking a Young Wolf, getting a card back immediately, you're going to be pretty happy about that, and it's just really threatening.
Just the fact that you're talking about playing this card Modern as just sort of being good on rate, I think speaks to how strong it is.
Yeah.
Even and then like Standard and Pioneer, I think even if you're not, like, I think the obvious place is to build like an Aristocrat style deck with lots of sackable things, but I think even it'll be good there for sure. But I think even most of the big black mid-range decks are going to change their deck a little bit to have some small value creatures or tokens so that this card's just really solid.
Yeah, I think you do, you know, it's not good if you don't care about it, and I think it's really going to shine if you're the type of deck looking to play a card like Blood Artist, where you kind of have a combo-y finish maybe even and sack a bunch of stuff. But
Agreed.
I think, yeah, the fact that I think it might not be worth putting in a deck if you're not doing that, but what's really nice is that when you draw it in these decks that are doing that, it's not like, oh, damn, I drew my Blood Artist. This doesn't do anything.
Right. In Pioneer, there's the Cat Oven deck.
Yeah.
Where obviously that sounds great. I still think, though, even in Standard, like black-white mid-range decks that play the White Overlord, and I'm sure there's some dinky 1 and 2 mana creatures they could play, or they create
There's
tokens.
a handful of 1-drops that just sack and give you a body back, so
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Maybe if they're an Esper, there's some blue creatures I think that can trip, like the Otter and stuff. So
yeah,
I think there's a lot of potential for this card. I don't know how often you're going to be like doing the big flip it over and get all the
I mean,
emblem and all that, but boy,
the flip kind of helps just for lethal, I guess. I kind of think you need a sack outlet anyways to flip it, so the attack trigger doesn't matter that much to me, but mostly just that, like, you could have a line where you sack a lot of your board, drain them a bunch of life, and now you have a 5/5 flyer. So that's the rest of the damage.
Right. Although there's certain decks that will just not be able to beat that emblem in certain scenarios also. So
Yeah, like, it does count opposing creatures, so really interesting in like a Cat Oven Mirror.
Right. Or if your opponent has to kill your creatures to win the game and they're at a low life total, it's pretty rough for them.
Yeah.
Very pushed card. Not surprised we both have it high on the list. And it's Sephiroth, which is
Yeah, I know he's a big bad guy.
He's the most popular villain, I think, in the series. Yep. So, as far as I know. So that was my number 3. My number 4 was Cloud.
Okay.
So I'm on to my 2 and 1. I think you have a number 3, though?
Yeah, my number 3 is Tifa Lockhart. So,
nice.
1 and a green for a 1/2 trample, legendary creature human monk, and whenever a land you control enters, double Tifa Lockhart's power until end of turn. This is pretty specifically a modern card, I think, because of fetch lands, and also the types of pump spells that exist in modern. But, in fact, this kind of died down. The 1 toughness creatures are a little too frail, and I guess this deck would be kind of weird because I don't know what other threats you'd play after Tifa, but you can play Tifa and then untap with it, and then, like, there are just a ton of pump spells that comboed with the fetch land will get this above over 20 power, and it already has trample. So it kind of does all the work for you. You can play a fetch land with her trigger on the stack, groundswell her, then she gets +4/+4, then it gets doubled, and then you get fetched and she's up to 20.
And in modern, most people's starting life total is not 20. So
yeah, 20 trample is usually lethal. A lot of the decks that don't damage themselves also don't really have blockers. So
yeah. Man, I wanted to put this on the list so bad, and I didn't. I was thinking it's probably not good enough for modern, but I'm glad to hear that you think it might be. It's a pretty cool card.
Yeah, I mean, winning really fast is, I think, the kind of barrier to entry for a lot of cool things in modern to some extent, and that's all this card is really trying to do.
So there's definitely a like tier 2 or maybe 3 deck that's going to be played in standard that's going to use Tifa with like the fetch lands that are available in standard with like Fable Pesters and Evolving Wilds, I think, because there's all these chocobos that trigger off a landfall that are pretty good. So people will definitely try that. I didn't think it'd be good enough, and I think the deck will probably play Tifa, but all the best decks in standard interact against creatures really well. They have lots of interact removal, or they, make giant hasty tramplers where you play 3/3 on turn 3 isn't going to stop them.
And then another nice thing, I guess, I don't think Legendary is upside on this card, but fortunately, I think the way it'll play out, at least in Modern, is you won't be that sad that it's Legendary. If your opponent's not killing it, you'll probably be winning.
This is one of the Legendaries you could probably play 4 of.
Yeah, exactly. I think you could really build your deck around, and I'm curious what that means for the rest of your deck. Are you going to play Infect? Are you going to find the next best thing that's good with pump spells, or are you just going to
That's the other thing that caught me up. I just wasn't sure what else the rest of your deck would look like.
Yeah, it could have Preordains. I'm not sure. I guess it's going to have a lot of fetch lands, so you're going to have your Surveil lands in there too, which helps kind of sculpt.
Have you read all these chocobos? Do you know what they all do?
I know what most of them do, yes.
Yeah. That seems like a standard deck, right? And then there's the vehicle, the Regalia, that gets you the lands every turn when you attack with it. Landfall on your birds. The one mana bird that gets put, it's like Champion of the Parish for lands.
Yeah, that's on my list, and you could guess where.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, let me hear it.
That card's awesome. Yeah, so Saz's Chocobo is my rank 2 on my list. This is more just that I think these cards are like interesting and powerful and might spawn something kind of totally new, is why they're kind of high on my list, with Vivi being number 1. But this card, as I mentioned with Cecil before, being a 1-drop it's just hard to call a 1-drop vulnerable, first of all. And this card there's already a Zoo deck in Modern. You might change your deck a little to be more landfall friendly. I'm not sure if there's some cards you'd actually play. But even if you just like play this and start playing fetch lands most of the game, the fact that it just like stays large, Step Links once saw play in Modern, it doesn't anymore at all. But an issue with Step Links obviously is eventually it doesn't do anything. And if you top deck this card, that's the case, but it's not the case when it's in your opening hand. It's just going to be a threat that's going to be large. And yeah, I think it just can deal a lot of damage in Modern.
Okay.
There's a deck that I see every now and then that uses Leyline of the Guild Pact and Sign of Draco, but also Dryad of the Illusion Grove and Valakut, and this might kind of fit in there pretty nicely. Just kind of a landfall deck, landfall aggro. There's a lot of other landfall things, maybe even step links. I think that you could consider building some weird Scapeshift aggro deck. That's been a thing I've seen every now and then in Modern as well.
Well, that sounds kind of wild. I have this whole section on my list. Where'd it go? I guess I deleted it. But it was like Tifa, aka Bird Tribal. And I had it pretty high, and I kept moving it down because I was like, there's no way. Because of all these. I had the Jacobo.
Yeah, I'm not really a believer in the standard versions of these landfall cards for reference. It's mostly just how powerful fetch lands are.
Fetch lands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now fetch lands have just, like... There's never been a better time to jam way too many fetch lands in your deck in Modern because of the Surveil lands. Like, it's...
Gotcha.
You can just...
You might as well have every land be a fetch land except for the things you want.
Yeah, you could play, like, 6 fetchable lands and the rest of your lands be fetch lands, and it's not really that weird.
Mm-hmm. So my 2 and 1 are just lands.
Okay.
Do you think these cards aren't going to be that impactful, or did you just decide not to put lands on your top 10?
I don't think those cards are going to be that impactful. I'm guessing you mean the adventure lands and maybe Starting Town.
Yeah. So those I bundled the adventure lands together.
Okay.
And then I put Starting Town. So I'll read the cards. Starting Town, Land Town. This land enters tapped unless it's your first, second, or third turn of the game. Adds a colorless, and you can tap and pay 1 life to add many of any color. This card seems like an upgrade to Mana Confluence to me. And I just assumed that an upgrade to that card would see play in a lot of formats. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's why I put it on, because it just seems like the kind of card that'd be a multi-format all-star. Do people not play Mana Confluence at all in any format anymore?
They do sometimes in Pioneer, but I do think a big upside of Mana Confluence is always coming in untapped. And I guess why I'm pretty low on this card is actually from playing a lot of Standard, like Esper Pixie in particular, but Jeskai Oculus. These 3-color decks, that their mana base consists of fast lands and pain lands for the most part. They usually have 12 fast lands and 8 pain lands and a couple basics. Those decks, they sometimes struggle with their colored mana, but for the most part, they kind of struggle with with their lands being the way they are, and you just draw too many pain lands and you lose to those, or you draw too many fast lands and eventually, like, a lot of your lands just enter tapped on the later turns, and it really slows you down. And this card's just got the worst of both worlds, but obviously a little bit more flexible. And then lastly, it's not a fast land. The text that it's only on your first, second, or third turn, I think, is like a lot worse than a fast land. I think you play a surprising amount of games of Magic where you like miss your third land drop and then you hit it the next turn, and that's just gonna be tapped when that happens.
Yeah, that's true. Obviously that this card's worse in that way. It's like better with ramp, maybe, I guess, but for the most part it's worse. I just think, just adding colorless is such an easy buyout. And having a pain land that could essentially be a tri-land, because the mana in Standard is pretty rough, even though there's so many dual lands. Like, I've even gone so far as to maybe play the tapped tri-lands, but those aren't really good either. So I was thinking a card like this might see a lot of play in it as like a 1 or 2 of it spattered across 3-color decks.
I think I agree with you, and maybe I just don't have it on my list because I know if I play those decks, I'm gonna know I have to play 1 or 2 Starting Towns, and I'm still gonna hate that I drew too many fast lands or too many pain lands. And this card's not. Yeah. This card's not. It's not like it's either or, right? It's just both all the time. Like, it's not.
Right. Well, it's not a pain land all the time, because.
Well, the pain lands aren't pain lands all the time either.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
But yeah.
Yeah, but this you can put in your like 3-color deck, and that's a pretty big upgrade. We'll see. I kind of understand where you're coming from. Especially in the older formats, and even in Standard too. As for the adventure lands, these just seem really good to me. You don't like them?
Yeah, I kind of compared them to like MDFCs of the past. I
Mm-hmm.
just think so. They're sort of two for ones. The second part is a tapped lands, but a tap land late in the game is maybe not what you want. The ones that cost less mana, the red and black ones, are certainly the most appealing ones to me, I think, for that reason, because starting earlier in the game, drawing like an extra tap lands could be pretty valuable. But I think in order to put these in your deck, you kind of want to be playing a longer game, and I'm not sure that like the abilities on the cards necessarily line up with that on the red and black ones specifically.
Okay, that kind of makes sense. Do people play with what's that card called? In I guess mostly Pioneer at this point, but they used to play with it in Modern. The creativity, Indomitable creativity. Red
Yeah,
one's pretty good with that, right?
sort of. The lands is kind of awkward with Dwarven Mine though.
That's true.
It's not a mountain.
Well, you don't have Dwarven Mine in Pioneer.
Yeah, that's true. That could be useful for Pioneer creativity decks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I guess like when I compare this card to Spikefield Hazard, though, I just think that like the text of Spikefield Hazard, even though it's not like a 2-for-1 like this card is a pretty big deal. And then kind of the clunkier MDFCs that I've seen play are the ones that actually can enter untapped for 3 life. And I think that's maybe what I feel like these are missing. Like I kind of wish they had a
Mm-hmm.
life paying buyout to enter untapped.
I'm
I just don't
assuming.
want to put like a tap land in so many, like a one color tap land especially, just doesn't
Mm-hmm.
even feel like a land that's acceptable as like some buyout. Like I don't want to play a single turn as blue red prowess where a tap land I'm playing is just going to be mono red even, and the blue one's kind of
Mm-hmm.
useless in that deck, so you'd never play it.
I'm assuming. So okay, I think that the fact that most of these lands are 2-for-1s is a pretty big deal. I'm assuming they're not good enough at all for Modern for the most part. But I think in Pioneer and Standard, they're just going to see play in lots of decks, and maybe not Is It Prowess, but like the white one. I mean, the white one is a 3-for-1 essentially. And if you have like, if you're thinking about the Beanstalk deck and you have Beanstalk in play, I mean, this could be like a 3-for-1 or 4-for-1 out of your just land. And I think that the fact that they're all pretty much 2-for-1s, or like the blue one can be a win condition in a blue control deck. I think all that adds up to enough. And they're not that exciting, and I don't think a lot of decks are going to play more than one or two of some of them in their colors, but it seems like the kind of thing that is going to be played a lot in Pioneer and Standard. I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah, it's just they're small things. I just feel like they're the types of cards that when I saw them, I kind of felt the same way you did. But then when
Mm-hmm.
I actually started thinking about homes for them, I just kind of felt like their rate was too bad.
Well, you might be right. Um,
If you take any of these effects, like I understand they have this modality to them where like they can be a tap land early when you need land drops, so that's nice. But like the actual 2-for-1 you get out of them is pretty bad, I think, for like how much mana you're spending, and then you need to play a tap land to like get it again later out of your land. There's some weird things I think about. I haven't looked at any specific cards, but I just wonder if there's some weird combo-y stuff you can do, maybe with the red one specifically, where you're like bouncing it and replaying it. But I guess that involves being able to continually play lands, especially play lands from exile is kind of a tall ask to do multiple times in a turn.
yeah. It's funny. I was going to leave these off because I didn't want to like have to figure out which is the best, what number that's at, and or am I going to have more than one on the list? And then I messaged you asking what you were doing with the lands, and you're like, yeah, you can put them on if you want to talk about it. So I just put them on as number one because I
Yeah,
figured they'd see a lot of play. Um, I still think they're pretty good. I think the effects, the white one's probably the best, the green one's probably the worst. The red one is pretty flexible. Like if you just have a lot of lands.
I think the red one's the best and the blue one's the worst. So
Okay, well the blue one's not great either.
yeah, I just
Uh,
think that whenever I read that line of text, I think that doesn't do anything. It
I
doesn't
think
even
there's a
help you win.
chance the blue one is not good at all, and I think there's a chance that it's maybe a good for control mirrors or a control win condition.
Like I guess if you like untapped with the Phyrexian Jace, you could cast Overture and then win the game with the
Mhm.
rest of your Jace. So
A lot of the times, I've played a lot of control decks in Standard, and a lot of the times when you play against the Beanstalk deck, it's like hard to beat them with anything but mill because of
yeah,
how their deck works and how broken Beanstalk is. So you end up having to play Jace even though it's not a very good card, and I thought, one of these or two of these in your lands might be a good substitute. But maybe it's too bad to play them.
I just think you have to also play Jace to make this card win the game. This is kind of my issue with it. Like, if they just have 25 cards in their deck and you cast this, I just don't think I think you're just going to lose immediately to whatever their next turn is.
Yeah, and then the black one...
it's just missing instant. It's so tough. You really need...
Instant?
Yeah, just especially because, like, it's just already clunky, and it's just the fact that it's a tap lands. I think if these lands could let you pay 3 life or something to enter untapped, I'd be all about them.
Had some criteria, yeah.
They're just...
Man, you might be right. You're kind of bumming me out.
Sorry. I was excited for these when I saw them too. I mean,
They're so cool. They're like a spell analyst.
Like, to be honest, I've been, testing a little standard, and I'll mention this, where it's like, I've played some Lindblum in the Prowess deck, and they're gone already. It's just, like, too bad to have a tap land in that deck.
I didn't really expect that to be in the Prowess deck.
Yeah, but...
Yeah. Okay.
Something like Spikefield Hazard would probably be really good in the Prowess deck, even though it's a tap land.
That's true. I haven't actually played with it at all. I bet the Ishgard, if anything, we'll see play in Beanstalk.
Well, they just can't afford their lands to not, like, be kind of these specific categories, I guess. But there could be a green-white Beanstalk deck that doesn't splash. I guess that actually is already a deck, and both of these cards could be good in that deck.
Yeah,
I'll
I've
agree
played
with
that deck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. I might have underthought those, to be honest. They kind of look like the kind of lands that would be very good, and maybe they're not.
I always call, like, cards like this, they always just remind me of Izzet Charm, I guess, where, like, they do a lot of things, but in the end, you're just paying too much mana for whatever thing you're getting, and...
Yeah, that's a good point. If bounce lands were legal in Standard, do you think they'd be good? I guess those add 2 colors.
Well, they would be good with the bird deck, that's for sure.
Yeah.
There is a bounce land that makes only colorless legal in Standard, actually, from OTJ.
That's true. Colorless is rough.
Yeah, I've played that card on Arena in Standard before. I've cast the 4-mana Search for 2 Deserts card and put it into play for a lot of value, trying to get to 10 mana to loop Season of Weaving and Stormchaser's Talent.
Okay. Well, that'll do it for today, folks. This was a fun episode for me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully it was a little more casual. And boy, there's some sweet cards in this set. It's funny, some of the sweeter cards aren't even very good, but I'm excited for it nonetheless.
Yeah, I think the cards are cool. I feel like we both thought Sephiroth was the coolest card in the set, so that's kind of funny.
For sure. I really like some of the summons.
The summons look fun, yeah.
And none of them really... Like, I almost put Summon Leviathan on the list, but I was like, there's no way.
Having already kind of played a little bit with some of the summons, I think once you play with them, this won't be true, but, like, they die 1 turn sooner than you think. It's kind of how I realized pretty quickly. I'm like, you get, like, 1 combat, maybe 2 out of these. Tough.
Right. I thought that was probably going to be the case, even though I knew that.
Yeah.
I thought still feeling it would be like, man, I barely got this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, you can... So, at the moment, we're having trouble with our Patreon. For some reason, they don't think we're a legitimate business. So, we're having that worked out. But in the meantime, you can check us out on YouTube or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time. I know you got something for us, Jacob. What do you got?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about an event at MagicCon Vegas, which is the same weekend as the Pro Tour, so I don't really plan on playing this event, but maybe if I don't stay to the Pro Tour, there's a chance. It's called the Secret Lair Spectacular. There's a few of them over the weekend. I won't say all the times, but I'm guessing there's like 4 or something on Fridays and Saturday, maybe Sunday even. And this is kind of the replacement of what used to be called the Secret Lair Showdown, which is an event I've actually played in a couple times, and to my success. Both times I played Secret Lair Showdowns, I kind of intended on playing them, I guess, which used to just be like a modern event. Maybe they've been other formats in the past as well, where you would play a single elimination modern tournament and try to win enough rounds to make, I guess, the top 8, but it was really the top 32 because there was 4 of them over the weekend. And if you made the top 32, you won a promo card. In the past, they've been Ragavan and Murktide Regent. and then you play it on Sunday in this top 32 to win like a 1 of 4 card, which in the past were Brainstorm and then Dark Ritual. And those like 1 of 4 cards are worth 5 figures. Like, it's crazy. And
Holy cow.
the one of
Like
the cards you get for top 32ing.
Wait,
yeah.
5 figures. 10,000, 20,000.
Yeah.
Holy moly.
Yeah. And
Side event.
Side event. Open entry. Anyway, Secret Lair Spectacular is kind of replacing that. As far as I can tell, there's none of this top 32 1 of 4 stuff, but they still have some pretty rare prizes. This one in particular, you can win foil and non-foil lightning bolt promos with unique art. And I looked on CCG Player and I saw the non-foil one, or maybe I have it mixed up. Whichever one's less rare was like $1,000, and the more rare one was like $2,500. Crazy valuable cards, but this tournament's a lot different than before.
Just play beta lightning bolts, friends. Man.
Yeah. This tournament is a modern tournament, single elim. Also, I guess this is 2 loss elimination Swiss rounds, so I guess it's a little different. I don't know about that, but it's not actually modern. There's some additional rules in this Secret Lair Spectacular. It says, enter the Secret Lair Spectacular and battle for awesome prizes. Beware, at any time your opponent may come from behind and bring your battle into the Secret Lair. You don't want to miss this amazing Secret Lair event. So, additional rules. So, it's a modern tournament. You bring a modern legal deck. Redemption challenge ticket. As a special action, once during your turn, you can call a judge to use your redemption challenge ticket to enter the Secret Lair. Once a player has redeemed their redemption challenge ticket, it can no longer be redeemed again. So I think you get 1 per tournament to use, is my understanding. Once a player...
1 per match, 1 per tournament.
1 per tournament.
Okay.
Once a player has brought the game into the Secret Lair, players cannot re-enter the Secret Lair this game. So that means if you do it, your opponent can't do it that game. So, entering the Secret Lair adds a specially designed deck of Plane Chase cards to help turn the tide of the game. This variant uses all the rules of the Plane Chase format, which then they link you to
no one knows.
pastimeevents.com/formats, which is like a website to explain all the rules of the formats. Plane Chase is not on that website. So you have to Google the Plane Chase rules and go to a different website. The rules of Plane Chase, I don't have in front of me, but I read them in preparation for this as a reminder. I've played it before. You have a Plane Chase deck, which is like a deck of plane cards. That's their type line is plane. They're usually sideways cards, is how you like orient them. Sometimes they're extra large.
Long time ago.
And when you enter a Plane Chase game, I think the top card of this shuffled deck will be revealed, and that's the plane you start on, which is a plane that'll have some secret rules. Not secret, sorry, special rules. And then as a special action in Plane Chase games, you can do what's called rolling the planar die, which I think you can only do on your main phase. And I think it's 0 mana the first time you do it in a game, or maybe per your turn. I should have studied a little more. And then it costs 1 additional mana to keep doing it. It's like it taxes you more and more. And the planar die, as my understanding, is a 6-sided die, where one of the sides changes the planes. One of the sides is chaos, which if you roll chaos does something special depending on what plane you are. The planes will say so. And the other 4 sides are blank. So 2/3 of the time you roll this die, it doesn't do anything. And I'm going to look up this I found. It's called Plane and Secret Lair. So they have a special plane deck. There's 10 planes. If you want to look and follow along yourself and go to Scryfall, there's a plane type called Secret Lair that you can see these, because this has already happened in Chicago, apparently. I didn't even know about this.
Secret Lair.
For the type line of the cards, you want to do Secret Lair, to be clear. So there's 10 of them. I don't even know if this is it. Like, I don't even know. It might be an exactly 10 card deck. It might be a 40 card deck with 4 of each of these. I don't know how it works. So you can do some weird stuff. A lot of it is like pretty minimal, especially in a game of Modern. But sometimes it could be randomly high impact, and if you're just like really far behind, you have this weird Hail Mary. But what's weird about it is how the planar die mechanic works. Because, it's a mana sink in a sense. And I mentioned last week on the podcast, my personal favorite deck in Modern is the Broodscale combo, which is a deck that makes infinite mana. And it's usually pretty good at winning the game when it has infinite mana on its own. But I like the idea that you could play that deck, and if you were missing the element of actually winning with your infinite mana, you could call a judge to then unleash this infinite mana sink outlet to specifically that game if you really needed it. And I read over all these cards, and I think you want to do it in a specific order, but as long as you make infinite mana first, before entering the secret lair, you should be able to win with the planar die from that point. You want to make sure you get infinite mana first, because some of these things have effects that could stop you from making infinite mana. For example, finally left-handed magic cards is a plane that says each creature's base power is equal to its prince's toughness, and each creature's base toughness is equal to its power. That would mean all your spawns from Brood Scale would instantly die, and you can't sack them for mana. So you need to make sure you make all your mana first. And as you go through, effectively flipping through these planes infinite times, one of them says, when chaos ensues, it's called Sans Mercenaries, so I'm reading this card, but it's written in Comic Sans, and also half the letters are capital in random spots. So it says, whenever chaos ensues, perform the following process X times, where X is the number of times you've rolled the planar die this turn. Each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. So that card should eventually win you the game, and none of the others of these should really lose you the games. There's one that makes you draw cards and discard and untap 3 lands with frantic searches, but then you would just draw into your win con anyways. And then there's another one that says players may cast spells as though they were other legal cards legal in this game's format with the same type and mana cost, so you get to start playing mental magic with your cards. That's why you want to make infinite mana first, so if your opponent randomly has a card that like could be a 0 mana instant in their hand suddenly, that it doesn't matter, you already have infinite mana. They shouldn't be able to like drain your mana from your mana pool. That's not like a thing that exists in
This sounds awful.
So yeah, you could play this in Vegas for effectively thousands of dollars on the line.
I mean,
And
if I
would
there, I would
highly recommend
probably
playing
do
Brood
it.
Scale for this tournament, because I just think that is the funniest outcome if that actually came up.
I feel like if I did this, which I definitely would, because it sounds like the payoff is definitely worth it for the amount of people who will probably be in these events. Although it might be more now than I bet people are starting to get wind of it. I would think, maybe not.
Yeah, well, they changed it up, I think, because the Secret Lair Showdowns that I played in, you think would be a really lucrative event, basically never sold out in the entire 2 years they existed. So they felt forced to change it, which makes sense to me. I don't know why this is the result of what they changed it to. And
I can just imagine playing against my opponent, and we're having a perfectly fine game, and then they just look at me and raise their hand and go, "Judge," and I'm like, "Why are you doing this to me, man?" do it.
They
to
said,
the next
"I want to
time."
roll the die. I want to."
Yeah.
My hand really
do it to
sucks,
me,
so I want
man.
the 1 in 10 chance that I hit on the plane that lets me play mental magic,
Don't do this to me.
or the
You
one
just
that
start at
turns
the
things
beginning of
into
the match.
copies of Yargle.
Maybe at the beginning of the match, you just a gentleman's agreement not to do this to each other. You just play a regular game of Magic.
Another reason to make infinite mana. Oh, this wouldn't really stop you, but Happy Yargle Day. When chaos ensues, choose Swords of Plowshares, Opt, Fatal Push, Anger of the Gods, or Explore at random. Copy the chosen card. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. That's a reference to the Yargle Secret Lair, because those 5 cards are the ones they just placed Yargle in the yard of.
Secret Lair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you really need a Swords of Plowshares and you get
You have a
Explore,
1 in
you
5
might be kinda
chance.
sad.
You have a 1 in 5 chance after the 1 in 6 chance of rolling chaos ensues, after the 1 in 10 chance of hitting that play.
What's even the point? Oh, it's painful.
Also, another reason I'd recommend Brood Scale, it just won the SCG Con in Indianapolis, actually. So, clearly a reasonable modern
Perfect
deck to
deck.
play if it can win a big tournament like that.
And perfect for chaos, as Jacob says.